What's up, wrestling fans? Two Bros Wrestling Show coming at you slightly delayed. We're on the tape delay tonight, Kevin. We were
The
preempted
prior
by,
broadcast, something ran long, so it's
yeah,
okay.
those darn sports ball things running long.
The main thing is that we are here, you're here, everyone that's watching us are doing so on a fun night because after 5-ish years of the Two Bros Wrestling Show, we are just now getting around to what is one of the most popular debates for every wrestling fan to have, and that is who's on your Mount Rushmore of professional wrestling. Tonight, Doug and I are going to talk about the male Mount Rushmore of wrestling, and thought it would best to break out the women, the tag teams. We're going to do all this in time, but we tackle the first time ever in our main event tonight, the male Mount Rushmore of pro wrestling. But
Wow,
before we do
this
that,
this is gonna get some comments.
I know. Let's do a little bit of news first
Let's do that.
to get everybody warmed up for the debate. And we'll start with some news that, oh my, poor Ridge Holland, and somebody we talked about a lot recently, and it's just come from bad to worse for this poor guy. Just more cutthroat actions, to be just blunt about it, from TKO and WWE. We recently reported about how Ridge's contract was not being renewed and how he said WWE was going to pay for his surgery and his rehab, but the fact that he couldn't work for months was going to be a challenge for supporting his family. Well, apparently that was the wrong thing to say because WWE did not like those comments, thought it brought negative attention, and reportedly terminated his contract before it actually expired, which essentially was only 8 days, but still, that was 8 days that Ridge Holland did not get paid when he obviously needed the money. WWE apparently considered Ridge's comments a breach of contract, and that's how they're getting away with it, really. Just petty, honestly. I mean, just totally petty. In a related note, though, a GoFundMe was started for Ridge. Many prominent wrestling figures had stepped forward so that others would follow suit. Chelsea Green, for one example, had committed to pledging $1,000 each month, but not so fast. Don't donate yet. Ridge has now distanced himself from the GoFundMe. I don't know if this is an attempt to get back on WWE's good side or what, but he has apologized for all the inconvenience his comment has caused. He didn't mean to, hurt anyone. He plans, he says, once he figures out how to take whatever has already been donated to the GoFundMe and donated himself to charity. For what it's worth, it was actually his mother who apparently started the GoFundMe for Ridge. So just kind of a mess all the way around. And it's just sad because it's so unnecessary. Not that layoffs don't happen, but the way this one was handled, and then come on, WWE, just because he brought forth the fact that he couldn't work and he had 5 kids. This is a guy who went to NXT, took a pay cut in order to better himself, and you're going to cheat him out of 8 days of pay just because you didn't like his comments. Really petty stuff from WWE.
Let's see. Any show in Saudi Arabia, a little bit of bad publicity from Rich Holland. Which one of those really looks worse at the end of the day?
Well, thanks to their decisions, they got both of them now, looking back
Right?
on them, right? Moving on to slightly happier news. I guess good for the wrestler I'm about to talk about. Maybe not so good for the rest of us who like seeing him in the ring. But we have not seen MJF in a minute, and we may be seeing less of him in the future as well because our dirtbag, Doug, apparently he has the acting bug. His current absence is because of Violent Night 2, which is filming in Winnipeg, Canada, and MJF is heavily featured. This comes after his well-received turn in Happy Gilmore 2 as Happy's son, as well as his role voicing Killer Croc in the animated Justice League movie. Of course, there's, the 2023 Iron Claw, where MJF was an executive producer and also played Lance Von Erich, even though that was unfortunately cut from the final product, but still Violent Night 2 is supposed to be wrapping soon. So I guess there's a chance that we may see MJF at some point in the not so distant future, although at this point he may just choose to move on to his next film project, assuming that he has one lined up. I think our man's gone to Hollywood, Doug.
I think he has. Can we get a Hollywood MJF faction? That would be awesome.
I can't imagine that he's done with wrestling, but it is pretty notable that he has not been around. He is always such a big part of the show when he is involved with the product. So I know that the writers and Tony, I'm sure, are missing being able to write for MJF. So I do hope he comes.
I'm sure
he does come back. Sticking with AEW and wrestlers we've not seen in a while, Brian Cage. Cage has announced by his social media that his time away due to injury is going to be even longer than anyone expected, as an additional surgery is going to be needed on his right knee. It would seem that some complications accompanied his first procedure. Therapy was not going to be enough to overcome the issues he's having, so it's back under the knife for Brian Cage. I'm assuming resetting that timeline again, and it feels like it's been a long time since we've seen him anyway, so you won't know that timeline apparently until he undergoes the second procedure and they get in there and see just how bad things are. So best of luck to Cage for a successful second surgery and a quick recovery.
Man.
The end of Peacemaker's second season brought the show's first ever appearance on the Nielsen streaming charts. The DC series, which stars John Cena, made Nielsen's original series rankings for the October 6th through 12th week, coming in 10th place. Peacemaker had 398 million minutes of viewing for the week. The season finale, which debuted on October the 8th, accounted for 42% of that total. The series is the first DC show on HBO Max to make the streaming top 10. So big news, and maybe fingers crossed, season 3.
That'd be great.
Would be great. Not so great for a former legend here, and that is WWE parting ways quietly with a Hall of Famer, one Jesse the Body Ventura. Maybe you didn't notice because he had been less and less part of the product, but the most recent Saturday Night's main event did not feature Jesse at all. And that's because Ventura, who was brought back in 2024 when Saturday Night's main event was relaunched, had a one-year deal with WWE that they have apparently allowed to expire. His presence on the show was meant to evoke nostalgia for the original 80s version of Saturday Night's main event. However, the Body didn't exactly endear himself to WWE and TKO. Famously, on the May edition of Saturday Night's main event, they put him on commentary, and the Body had an outburst that he just kept on and on about during the Drew McIntyre Damian Priest main event. He called it BS, if you remember, that Priest exited the cage and won the match, even though that has been how WWE cage matches have been decided. That has been a rule in WWE for decades now. But Jesse just would not give up on the fact that Priest, the face in this, was a coward who was running away. Probably very notable that the very next Saturday night main event in July, Jesse did not get put on commentary, had a very minor presence, and then in the recent edition, he did not appear at all. So I think everybody has decided it's best to just let things lie and go their separate ways. It's hard to modernize with the current product, I guess, if you're an old timer.
And if you're not up to date with the product, especially if you're a couple of decades out of date with the product.
He that was painful. I remember it being my botch of the week that week. It was kind of funny, but it was, I'm sure if you were, trying to do the lead commentating and that was what you were getting in the color commentating role, that's almost as bad as what poor Vic Joseph has to go through every Tuesday night on NXT. So. Hey, some programming news related to Dark Side of the Ring. If you're like me and we're waiting for this past year's season 6 to drop on Hulu, I've got some bad news. I don't know. I'm Wade Barretting the people here, but not only is the most recent season not going to be on the service, but the first 5 seasons disappeared as well. So hopefully you had a chance to watch all of those. They apparently lost them in October, just a few weeks ago. Hulu lost the rights. It's not clear if or even when, rather, or even if that is going to return. So you might have to find another way to get caught up if you are not on Dark Side of the Ring. Congratulations to TNA Wrestling. We've been doing a lot of this lately, but their hot streak continues. No, this isn't the big media rights deal we've been waiting on domestically, or otherwise I probably would have used this as a top story. But TNA has secured a multi-year license agreement with Clario Sports for TNA content across a variety of streaming platforms and cable platforms in Mexico and Latin America. The deal builds on TNA's recent momentum, setting attendance and viewership records with streaming content starting in January. They're going to be able to reach 17 territories throughout Central and Latin America. South America, here's hoping that all this good momentum continues and that we hear about a new domestic TNA deal for us U.S.-based fans here soon, so that we don't have to just read about TNA and can actually maybe watch TNA.
Cool.
We will end tonight with some news we'll have to keep an eye on, and it's something we've touched on here before as well, and that is the fate of the Warner Brothers Discovery and its HBO Max streaming platform. Comcast has retained elite Wall Street advisors Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley to craft a formal bid for Warner Brothers Discovery's prize studio and streaming operations. So sources close to the deliberations confirm that the cable giant has already secured access to Warner Brothers Discovery's confidential financial records, signaling serious intent to acquire the assets that house HBO Max. Recently, back as HBO Max after being Max, and then back to HBO Max. And then, of course, the legendary Warner Brothers film and television studios will be part of this as well. The board of Warner Brothers Discovery is actively exploring structures that could pair its streaming and studio divisions. They're going to pare it down. Tentatively, they're going to call that Warner Brothers and spin that off to an external buyer. Then they're going to take their television networks, which include CNN, TBS, HGTV, Food Network, etc., into a separate entity known as Discovery Global for stakeholders. So I know I just said a lot of words, a lot of industry tech talk. What does this mean for wrestling? Well, Comcast, if it's successful in its bid, the company's basic strategy is this. They're going to fold HBO Max content as well as its 100 million subscribers into Comcast's Peacock streaming service. So the combined platform would have a huge library. And while Peacock has been successful at things like live sports and for a while, WWE, PLE programming, it doesn't currently have a depth of original content. So them adding HBO classics like Sopranos and Curb Your Enthusiasm, as well as current hits like Hacks or Euphoria, The Last of Us, that would be huge. It would also, though, set up an interesting conundrum. Comcast may have recently lost WWE's main roster PLEs, but it has strong ties to WWE by still being the home of Saturday Night's Main Event and NXT PLEs. So AEW's content library is also on Max. And that also became recently the way that you would best order AEW pay-per-views. So I can't imagine a combined streaming platform is going to be the home of NXT, Saturday Night's Main Event, and AEW.
AEW? No. That's no.
Who do you think will be the odd man out if that scenario?
Tony and his squad.
Exactly. Yeah, it sucks. On one hand, I mean, the fragmentation currently of having 8 billion different services to watch all the things, you would have quite a huge library if Peacock and HBO Max were to combine. That would be good for consumers overall. It will be bad for Tony and AEW, who will then have to find a new streaming home, I'm sure. Although it does sound like if they do this deal the way it sounds like they're going to try to do this deal, they're just purchasing HBO Max and they want this library of Warner Brothers Discovery, all the classic shows, the rights to all the classic movies. Everyone's wanting out of the cable business. So all the cable companies that include AEW's current partners and TBS and TNT, that will end up being something separate. So there's a very good chance that AEW will survive if this happens. They will still have their weekly shows. They just will lose the deal that they recently signed in order to keep all their content in HBO Max. So we will continue to follow that because that's big.
That is big. And, I know you mentioned Peacemaker earlier. I wonder what that does with the synergy of the James Gunn's DCU with the movies and HBO and the synergy that exists as it all is in one continuous universe there if they break apart, the Warner Brothers and the TV and the movies there. But that's probably a show for a different channel. But just speculating, it's going to affect more than just wrestling.
Yeah, one of the reasons that they think that, one of the reasons insiders believe that they are why they're doing it the way that they're doing it is that if they break out the cable companies, it doesn't look like you're trying to do a monopoly. It might be easier to get regulatory approval if you're saying we're not just, taking over the industry. We're going to spin off all of our networks into something else. And that way you might get a quicker approval from the federal government.
Right.
But the true story is that more than that, they just people want out of linear networks because that's where money is being lost currently. So we will see. And with that.
All right. Main event time.
Main event time. We are going to talk about the Mount Rushmore of professional wrestling.
Man, this was hard too, by the way.
Well, yes, because
so difficult.
When you think about, how many people can I pick? Well, there are only 4 faces on Mount Rushmore, so we should probably stipulate our rules that we're making for ourselves on this, because we know, even though we did not confer in advance, we know that we're very likely to have some overlap. So what we're going to do is we're going to name 4. We're doing one at a time, and we're going to make our justifications for why we would put them there. But if we could add a 5th face to Mount Rushmore, which has been, with the real Mount Rushmore, something that has been debated through the years by various individuals on, adding another president. Heck, some presidents have even floated the idea of adding themselves. We're going to add a 5th to our male Mount Rushmore. And I also would want to stipulate before we get started, the way that I, first I was going to approach this by who do I feel like I would put up there? Some of my favorite wrestlers, some of the, best wrestlers in my opinion. And I decided instead to take the tact of, if this is truly a Mount Rushmore, not everybody's a fan of the 4 presidents on the regular Mount Rushmore. I thought it would be best to put on the 4 men who probably best epitomize pro wrestling if you were to narrow it down to 4. And there are actually people on my list that I can't say I'm the biggest fans of. But I feel like they still need to be up there.
See, I did a similar thing because I'm thinking the people who have got us to where we are today in wrestling.
That's it. That's exactly
where if without these 4 men, would there be wrestling as we know it today, or would there even be wrestling? And I'm going to say no without these 4 men, and that's the mentality I went into this with. Much like you, are these people that I want to put there? Actually, most of them no. But do they belong there for this particular thing? Yes.
So let us know as we go through this. If you're watching us live, chime in. If you are watching us on delay, let us know who your picks are and let us know where you think we got it wrong. We're going to get right into it. Let's hit them one at a time. I don't know if I'll go first.
Okay.
Because my first one, I'm kind of in a little bit of a chronological order as I thought this out. And this is maybe one that if it was Kevin picking for his personal favorite.
Uh-oh. Kevin's been censored by TKO. He can't do his.
I'm back.
Okay, there he is. I was just saying, you've been censored by TKO. Tony Khan.
They didn't want to hear this pick. They tried to shut me down, but I am going to persevere and say that number 1, Bruno Sammartino. And here's the reason why. yeah, this is why it's probably not someone I would normally put on my list, is that Bruno was before my time. And I can't say that I'm hugely familiar with his work. I've watched a lot of in retrospect. When I first saw Bruno Sammartino, he was at the tail end of his career. He was an old man who was a part-time wrestler, would occasionally wrestle with his son, was mostly Vince McMahon's sidekick doing color commentary. However, historically speaking, if you look at the modern world of pro wrestling, it was built on what Vince McMahon Jr. put together. What Vince McMahon Jr. did to make wrestling huge was build upon what his father had done in the Northeast Territory, the original WWF, actually the WWF. There would be no WWF if it were not for Bruno Sammartino. Sammartino was a star for Vince Sr. He was the star for Vince Sr. He was someone who was, because of his, his ethnic upbringing and background, he was someone that Vince Sr. could take to all those Northeast towns, those working class towns, those Bostons, Philadelphia, New York, and the immigrant population would turn out in droves for Bruno Sammartino. He was basically the man throughout the entire 1970s,
Right.
that carried all of what was WWF and allowed it to have the foundation to become the global juggernaut that it is now. And so I'm not sure it would have happened the same or as well if it wasn't for Bruno.
That's actually a very legit and good first head on the mountain there. I've got to say, and I kind of feel bad about who I'm going to throw up next now, but I thought about Bruno, but I wanted to, I have two, I think, what will be very controversial figures on my Mount Rushmore. That's a little teaser, but he's not the first one. The first one also controversial, but because without you mentioned Vince Sr., without Vince McMahon Jr., I do not see any way, shape, or form that wrestling as we know it today. We would not be talking about the WWE or even the WWF or the WWF at all in any kind of context. And we may not even be talking about Bruno Sammartino. It could have just been lost to some Jim Cornette type, wrestling historian out there in the void somewhere where wrestling would not be in the zeitgeist, like especially like it was in the 80s and 90s that brought us into it full on as kids. Sure, there'd still be your little indie promotions and maybe the NWA would still be kicking around somewhere, but it would probably exist much like it does today, as an internet thing out there where it doesn't get really much TV time and it's very, very niche way out there. But Vince did his part to bring wrestling into the American culture as it exists today, really global culture. I mean, at this point, TKO is buying up global promotions, all these international promotions and just gobbling it all up. And I think without Vince and that vision to take things from his dad and just run with it, break the rules, and go in and not even divide up the territories. He wasn't even concerned about the territories. He just gobbled up all the talent and just put them all in Stanford and went from there and just invaded everywhere. So as an allegedly despicable human being as he is, there is no Mount Rushmore of wrestling. And dare I say, there's no wrestling as we know it today without Vince McMahon Jr.
Man, you're such a mark for Vince.
Nothing.
Hey, no, well played. Honestly, well played. I thought in terms of wrestlers, but there is no wrestling without Vince McMahon Jr. They're just not in the form that people enjoy it today. Even if you hate WWF, even if you hate Vince, I mean the AEW model. Even to an extent, what New Japan ended up doing to broaden the appeal of their product. It all relates back to the stuff that Vince did when Vince was younger and still had the creative mind that again, as despicable a human being as he reportedly
Right.
was and is, I'm sure, when
Mhm.
he was at his creative peak, he did a lot to advance the world of pro wrestling more than any other person. I mean, ever. So I can't argue with that pick. Even though I didn't think in those terms, I applaud it. It's true and definitely a controversial pick, but there is no wrestling business as it stands without him.
And I don't really think that there's anybody else who would have had that crazy vision. I mean, maybe there was, somebody out there, but you had to have not only that vision to push wrestling to something else onto this first national, then global stage and make it this entertainment juggernaut, but yeah, I think the wrestling is a very old school business for the most part, and I think there's a lot of territory mentality that probably still exists out there today. And the things Vince did, I don't think anybody else ever would have done, and we'd not be here. We wouldn't have the show right now. We'd have to watch sports ball or reruns of The Simpsons or something on Sunday nights.
So thank you, Vince, I guess.
Well, I'm not going to say that because I said there's people on this mountain that I don't think I would put there for my favorites, but
I
I think
wanted
they're
you to
the
say it
winner in
so
this
that I could
contest.
cut it and then just put that up only on a reel on our page, and it just
Just loop that me saying thank you, Vince.
thank you, Vince. Doug, you said you have your another choice that's controversial. I don't know if that's your next choice. I'm going to give you my next choice, which is maybe
Okay.
also controversial and might be the
Okay.
same person. So maybe we can talk about him together because I don't know how you have a Mount Rushmore of pro wrestling without the recently departed immortal Hulk Hogan.
Yeah. Yeah. Hulk is on my list. Actually, I was going to go with Hulk next too. Not the other controversial one I was talking about, but
Oh,
again, controversial.
well,
Yeah,
yeah.
controversial.
So then you have three controversial ones if he
I
wasn't your
probably have
controversial
four.
choice.
I probably have four controversial ones that I'm not necessarily sure I would put on my own, Mount Rushmore of great workers and my favorites. But in the context of this conversation, Hulk Hogan belongs there, man. Just like Vince, and and we gotta give credit to Vince for Hogan, or
Yeah,
I
or
guess
vice versa.
credit.
And
Yeah,
it's kind of chicken egg, right? Like
it really
who
is.
is responsible for the '80s boom? Was it Vince McMahon with the vision, or was it Vince McMahon realizing that he needed Hulk Hogan from the AWA and that he could make that the center of what he was
Yeah.
going to do? Whoever gets the credit, I don't know that it would have been the same without Hogan. I think Vince could have
Mhm.
still done something, but it would not have been the same. And let's face it, wrestling was a small regional territory filmed in your local TV studio, airing at 2 o'clock in the afternoons on Saturday. And it was niche. It wasn't
Very much. Yeah.
acceptable, like, entertainment for a national audience. And then even an international global audience. And
Hmm.
Hogan is the reason why the biggest boom in the history of wrestling happened in the 80s. It was on his back. No, he's not anyone's favorite worker because he wasn't that great a worker at all. And also could fall into the, depending on how you want to remember someone, he could fall into
Hmm.
the troubled, despicable kind of character, either backstage politics or real life interactions. But hey, he was the center of the wrestling world for 15-ish 20 years and managed to stay relevant all the way up to the end, even with all of his
He
scandals and
was
controversy.
he was definitely a hustler, and his biggest mark, going out there and pushing himself anywhere he could, and you know say your prayers, eat your vitamins. We all remember that from the '80s, and the Hulkamania cartoons and
Which
the
they're showing
yellow.
again on Saturday mornings on WWE's YouTube channel. They're dropping them every Saturday. So
See?
Saturday cartoons, Hulk Hogan's wrestling. I mean, the wrestling world forgave Hulk Hogan for all of his scandals, for him turning on Vince, state witness, for the U.S.
Hmm.
government and the steroid scandal. I mean, scandal followed this man throughout his whole career, and despite it, he, for the most part, would kick out before the 3 somehow, and Hulkamania ran
Great
wild.
analogy. Great analogy.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can't have a Mount Rushmore without Hulk Hogan.
I
I'm glad
agree.
that we both have that one that we agreed. I knew we'd have some overlap. And neither of us I know are Hogan fans, but I'm glad that, like me, you realize that
Yeah,
love him or hate him, he belongs up there.
he does belong there. Yes, he belongs there. But
You,
yeah,
you
Hogan
can't
was on.
you can't talk the history of wrestling
No,
and
you
get
can't.
around Hulk Hogan. There's just no
Really
discussion
can't.
that he's not in.
No.
Well, that takes
So
care of 2. So you want to give me one that maybe I don't have?
sure, because it sounds like you went all wrestlers, and I didn't necessarily go all wrestlers. There's another promoter or public facing promoter anyway I have on here. Like I say, this another controversial call, but the man wrote a book called "Controversy Creates Cash," so I've got to recognize Eric Bischoff for everything that he has done and put him up there. McMahon, Hogan, Bischoff. These are all names that people recognize as wrestlers or wrestling adjacent folks. Eric Bischoff crushed what 97 weeks crushed Vince McMahon and the juggernaut that was WWE at the time, or WWF, with his basically stealing from Bullet Clubbish ideas from Japan to create the NWO and just bring all that talent in and really kick off a wrestling renaissance back in the day where you remember every Monday night you're recording one on your old school VCR while you're watching the other one live, and you're going back and forth anyway. So when one ends, you go and watch the other, which of course led to brilliant calls where Bischoff is telling Tony Schiavone to call the end to WWE matches so people won't even bother turning over, since Raw wasn't always live. It was, taped quite a bit of the time. But I mean, Bischoff, for all the slimy, sleazy nonsense that he is, and association people he's been associated with, just like Vince and really just like Hogan, I think you have to recognize all the contributions, even in that short 97 weeks. And that legacy has gone on, beyond that. But
I think it's
again,
interesting that you have 2 executives on your Mount Rushmore, but I get it.
these these are, at least they were on air talents, maybe not bumping every week, but they at least were on air talents. I'm not going to toss Vince Russo up here anywhere, but
Everybody you've tossed is controversial in some way or the other. I think that thus far the only person we've mentioned up there that probably passes the test as being a good human being is Bruno Sammartino.
mm-hmm.
My next choice, I don't know that you could necessarily make the case that he has led a spotless life, but for whatever reason, it doesn't seem to ever affect the way that we all feel about him. And I'm going to just go out there with this one because he is not just my favorite wrestler of all time, and this isn't a personal choice. He is the greatest professional wrestler of all time. And that is both his in-ring acumen and the way that he put matches together, the way he could wrestle for an hour and keep you entertained in a day before work rate was even a thing, before people rated matches with star ratings. And it was the Nature Boy, Ric Flair. And then you do his character and his mic work and his cultural influence in both pop culture, rap culture, the modern culture. I mean, sports culture, like you still get woos in arenas, football fields. He, put him on the screen. Everyone woos.
Everyone woos.
Ric Flair is one of those folks who has transcended the sport and managed to stay relevant for 50-ish years in this business in entertainment. And it isn't just like Hulk Hogan where you have that influence. You also can add the work rate and the mic skills and all the things that we wrestling fans really gravitate towards. And they had all the rest of it too. He really was everything. And honestly, if I was ranking, he would be my number one personal favorite on my Mount Rushmore, because Ric Flair is the greatest
Same.
professional wrestler to ever live.
Agreed. Definitely not a spotless life he has lived. Definitely not. But uh, everything you said, I agree with. He was my last. He was like my redemption pick on this list, honestly, because I knew, yeah, I knew how I wanted to set this up and how I wanted to present everybody. But then when I get to, it's like there's got to be somebody who transcends all of this and is that total package, not Lex Luger, but really the total package that I can mention in these four people. And of course, that's the Nature Boy. Of course, it is. The
Of
foundation
course
of
it
the
is.
Four Horsemen. It's like you say, people to this day woo. People know why they're wooing when they see Flair. You mentioned Flair. I woo every time I just drive through Charlotte, just because.
Yeah. I mean, the Nature Boy is in any discussion as the greatest professional wrestlers to ever live. He's in any discussion as to who's on a Mount Rushmore. Anybody that would not even consider him for their Mount Rushmore knows nothing about the world of professional wrestling. So you can argue that one with me, anyone, if they want. But I mean, there's just the Nature Boy is on anybody's Mount Rushmore of wrestling if you are really a true wrestling fan.
Yes.
I have one more that's the four, and then we're going to go bonus round by adding a
Oh
fifth.
yeah.
So
Oh yeah.
actually, is that all your four?
That's my four because
Okay. Oh, that's
Vince.
right. You went first.
Yeah, well, we doubled up on Hogan, and then I went Bischoff, and then we've doubled up on Flair. So I'm at my four.
So this is my fourth one, and I have my bonus fifth one, and Doug has a bonus fifth one. So my fourth one, and again, I've put mine sort of chronologically. Stone Cold Steve Austin. Stone Cold was to the 90s what Hogan was to the 80s, and that is the centerpiece of what the professional wrestling universe was, the instigator for the next boom period of pro wrestling. The boom period that Hogan led started to die away in the 90s, and then there needed to be a change. And once again, Vince's favorite, Vince McMahon, had a vision. Uh, he took this guy from WCW who was disgruntled, who had made a cup of coffee for himself in ECW, where he went rogue and just it went from being stunning Steve Austin to showing what a Stone Cold Steve Austin could look like, foul mouthed and amazing on the microphone. And Vince realized that I could make money here. The Attitude Era was the most lucrative era in the history of pro wrestling, even more than what Hogan did in the 80s as far as making money and selling merch. You will see 316 shirts to this day, 30 years later. Austin 316 merchandise flies off the WWE shelves. It was the hottest period. It is part of what kicked off the Monday Night Wars. And Stone Cold was the biggest star of wrestling's biggest era. And unlike Hogan, he could actually work.
Yes.
He may not work like Flair, but he could definitely work and put together a match that would go, 30 minutes. Gosh, his feuds with The Rock, his feuds with Triple H, his feuds with Shawn Michaels, like his feuds with Bret Hart. Like you can just go on with all the great matchups that Stone Cold had. And that's why I put him on the Mount Rushmore.
Definitely worthy. Um, Definitely worthy. Not necessarily, I don't think controversial at all. I mean, if we're talking about Attitude Era, it definitely, Austin deserves a point in that conversation. Absolutely. So good pick. Good pick.
So, Doug, if you were allowed to add a fifth, if it is ordained by the government that we can go up on Mount Rushmore and put another face on there, which may happen someday in the real Mount Rushmore, if we were to do so for the wrestling Mount Rushmore, as tough as this was to narrow it down to four, who would it be that you would want to put up there that didn't quite make your list?
The man I would want to put up there didn't quite make it into the Attitude Era, but I think he's also a very, maybe not the household name that Dwayne The Rock Johnson is still to this day, but I think everybody knows that iconic voice, if nothing else from those damn Slim Jim commercials. Macho Man Randy Savage deserves a spot. You know, as my fifth Mount Rushmore Morley head. I
Morley
mean,
and Head. I
I mean,
mean,
he was a
hey,
great babyface. He was a great heel. He was just a great all-around worker. He could cut a promo. There's never been anybody that cuts promos like this man. So memorable, that iconic voice. Got to keep coming back to that voice. And just the madness truly in this dude's eyes at all times. Just the madness
dude,
of the Macho Man.
there has been a lot of crazy characters in wrestling and flamboyant characters and over the top characters, but Randy Savage is not only an original to this day. If they do a long shot of a crowd, you are never going to see a long
Always.
shot of a crowd that you're not going to see a couple of Macho Men in the crowd.
Yes.
Um,
Always.
his influence has just been transcendent, and he definitely was one of the biggest stars that come out of the 1980s, and
Mm-hmm.
was a good worker and an amazing character, and I applaud that choice. It is tough to get it down to 4, and I can
It
definitely
is,
see
man.
making room for Randy. Mine, not as big a star probably as Randy. I don't know. Maybe that's arguable. Mine is a pick from the 90s, and this was maybe where I didn't put him on as, maybe one of the guys that you would think of as the foundations of pro wrestling, but he's certainly the foundations of modern wrestling. And if you can make a little extra space, I don't know that we talk total package. I don't know that anyone ever had as much of everything it needed to be successful in this business as what Shawn Michaels had.
Oh, yeah.
HBK was
Fair.
probably the greatest big match performer in the history of the business. And I say that as someone who just went on about how Ric Flair was the greatest all around of
Mhm.
all time. When it came to the biggest stages, when it came to the best matches in WrestleMania history, when it comes to the best matches of the last, 20 years, go back and look at how many of them had HBK in them. Just his WrestleMania matches, there was a reason that he was called Mr. WrestleMania, is that if he had a
Mhm.
match on the card, it didn't matter if it was with Vince. He was going to steal the show. He was that good. He was that good at working from underneath. He was that good at taking the beating and then still somehow managing to have you believe in the hope spots. He could wrestle bigger opponents. He could wrestle
Mhm.
non-athletic opponents like Vince. He could match up with someone who was could be technical like himself in a Bret Hart and have a 65-minute classic. Or he could do gimmick matches like a Razor Ramon match, with the famous, one of the most famous early ladder matches that
Yeah.
everything was built on after that. You could take a guy who has nothing in common with him style wise or size wise, like Undertaker, and have the greatest match in the history of WrestleMania. HBK
Mhm.
was good on the mic. He was a big part of the Attitude Era. He was in that little bit of a gap where he came along right before, he was there during the downtime between the 80s boom and really helped kick off the Attitude Era with a little bit of
Yeah.
DX. So he kind of bridged that gap. But he's one of my favorites of all time. And Ric Flair, I mean, gosh, okay, Ric Flair, the Ric Flair retirement match, just like you could name
I'm
so many big
I'm
matches.
sorry. I love you. Boom. Love that finish.
And then now he's killing it in NXT in a leadership position. But
Mhm.
HBK is a personal favorite. I don't know that if I had to limit it to 4, if you could make the claim that he deserves to be in the top 4.
Right.
But if I could make room for somebody on Mount Rushmore, as this is the greatest of what this sport has to offer, HBK would be that person for me.
I hear you, brother. Another excellent pick. It's
All
just so
right,
hard. So
it's
hard.
so hard.
Phew.
And this is
So,
this is this is the men. We got the women to do at some point, and I also want to do the top tag teams of
oh,
a Mount Rushmore of tag teams, because that would be hard. But the male
yes.
one is obviously, there's been more male performers, more single male performers
Mhm.
than any other wrestling category. So this I knew would be the hard one. This is the one that people talk about
Yeah.
when they talk about the Mount Rushmore of wrestling, and I can't believe it took us honestly this long to get around to
I
it.
know. I know.
But what did you all think? Which of our choices do you agree on? We had a couple of overlaps, a couple of left field choices, a couple of controversial choices. Who are your picks
Right?
for the Mount
Yeah.
Rushmore of
Do you
wrestling?
agree? Do you disagree? And how strongly do you disagree? Do you strongly disagree? Do you strongly agree? Let's do a questionnaire in the comments. I'd love to hear it.
Yep, let us know. And with that, Doug, let's hit our big finish.
Let's do it.
Let's bring it on home, Doug. Let's talk botch of the week.
Botch of the week. Kevin, this came on my radar earlier today. I have not seen Collision from last night, but I did catch some wrestling news on the interwebs earlier today. And the performer known formerly as Tegan Knox, I forgot what she's going by now. And then there's some other gal that she's in a tag team with in AEW. They decided to pull the Sasha Banks and Naomi thing and say, yeah, we're not doing the job on our second week on the job, and walked because they didn't want to lose twice in a row after losing at their debut. Now, I understand picking your spot, and good for people for standing up for themselves, but this is a completely different situation than Naomi and Sasha Banks walking out back in the day, not wanting to do the job and taking a stand for themselves in what they saw was a very toxic environment, especially since, I've also seen a lot of reports where poor Tegan Knox was finding trouble getting bookings at all. Now, I don't know if either one of these gals was actually contracted or if they are actually all elite or if they're just doing like operating on a handshake for a couple of visits, but you're not going to get more bookings. And I'm calling this a botch all the way around for these gals by just not working and developing a reputation as someone who's difficult to work with. Doesn't make sense to me, so I'm calling it a botch on those gals.
I'm with you. There's a principled stand, but Naomi and especially Sasha Banks were names that had options. Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry for Tegan, but you didn't set WWE or NXT on fire, and you're going to burn that AEW bridge. Doesn't seem like a smart move. Where do you go from here?
That's what I'm saying. AAA's out of the question. You're not going to TNA, where it's as tight as they are with the WWE.
Yeah. You're
going to end up on another career. Juggalo wrestling with Vince Russo writing for your characters.
Definitely, yeah, I agree with you. A botch. My botch is also AEW related, Doug, and I know that you a couple of weeks ago had mentioned this as your botch, so I'm sure you were just thrilled watching Dynamite this week, and the fact that AEW is introducing the North American Championship. This is a botch for a couple of reasons. One, as Doug's botch from a few weeks ago saying there's too many belts on AEW, it's almost laughable that they are starting a new championship on there with so many different promotions and so many different belts running around on their TV. But it's a double botch because now they've made the NWA mad, because historically the national title was an NWA championship that they merged with the U.S. championship back in the 80s. Mm-hmm. That's the same U.S. title that WWE uses today. Well, a few years back, the NWA, since they had relaunched, also relaunched its national championship to break that lineage with the old USA title, which is sitting up in the Titan Tower somewhere. So they just made all kinds of people mad. They made Doug mad by adding another championship. They made William Patrick Corgan mad by duplicating. Now there's two national champions. We don't need any more champions. Tony Khan especially doesn't need any more champions. That's a botch.
No, it is a botch. Even though this belt is allegedly the belt that will be defended in other promotions by an AEW champion. Whatever. Too many belts.
It looks cool. I mean, the throwback quality of it does look cool. But,
it does.
Yeah, we don't need it.
It's just going to get lost in the shuffle. Sasha Banks has got, I'm sorry, what's Mercedes Moné? I almost called her Melissa Moné. Mercedes Moné will end up with it at some point, where it'll be her 76th title that her frat boy guys are running around carrying for or whatever. But okay, enough of angry old men yelling at clouds. Let's get on to some awesome stuff.
Awesome stuff. There was a lot of awesome stuff, Doug. What is it about your performance?
Man, it's the little things for me right now in wrestling. Just And I'm such a stan for Dom, such a stan at this point. Super mark for the kid. You know,
Oh man,
if he ever had a more perfect line, it was when he told Rey Mysterio to keep his father's name out of his mouth when Rey mentioned Eddie Guerrero. This
yeah.
kid has so much talent, so much. The crowd popped even when CM Punk on Raw on Monday is talking about, going after, the kid who has two belts and doesn't deserve either one of them. And somebody wants to punch in the mouth, and everybody's like, woo! Everybody goes wild over Dom. Even when he's out there talking trash to his dad, Dom is just so good. It is just baked into his DNA. So performer, just Dominic Mysterio, just for everything. Dom for president at this point.
Man, we've mentioned Dom a lot, and he's taken that Performer of the Week honors from us a lot. And he just doubled up because you absolutely, words out of my mouth, my notes, Dirty Dom, the Rey Mysterio mentioning he'll never be Eddie Guerrero, keep my father's name out of your mouth. I lost it. It was just
I
like, as
know.
soon as that happened, I'm like, there will not be a better thing happen in wrestling this entire week
I
than
know.
that, than that right there.
It's like Dom sometimes Dom just does things to pop us, I think.
Oh man. And it isn't just us because you're right.
I know.
He is technically the heel still, but it's getting
Yes.
harder and harder to be a
So
baby face
hard.
facing Dominic Mysterio because it doesn't matter which side of the border you're on. Dominic is a face, regardless of
Mhm.
how he's booked.
Yes, he really is. I mean, he just can't help it. He's just oozing so much charisma and just I we could do an entire show about little Dom Mysterio, dirty Dom Mysterio at this point, and maybe we will
Yeah,
someday. Because in the
maybe
future,
we
he will
will.
belong on a Mount Rushmore. Kevin, you got a match. You always turn me on to like good matches that I've missed
Well,
throughout the week.
I think I am going to turn you on one to a good one you missed
All right,
because you've already said you didn't get to watch
DC
Collision
Collision.
last night,
Yeah.
and Collision had my match of the week. And forgive me if you've heard this one before, but Kyle Fletcher,
Oh well,
who
yeah.
I mean, I'm pretty sure at this point, like if we go back, half of our matches of the week, they've either been, Javon Evans if he's wrestled
Yeah.
in NXT against someone, or Kyle Fletcher if he's had a match against someone in AEW. It's kind of like that hot streak that Swerve Strickland was on about
Yeah.
a year and a half ago, where every time he's on TV, he steals the show. Kyle Fletcher stole the show last night on Collision with yet another excellent title defense. This one against Ace Austin, who was always one of my favorite performers in TNA. But honestly, since he came over to AEW and became All Elite, his whole gun club situation and wrestling in tags and six mans, he really had not had a chance to showcase what made him an exciting
Uh-huh.
special X division wrestler on TNA. Well, obviously one-on-one against Kyle Fletcher over the course of a couple of commercial breaks in between, they had a good 20-ish minute affair
Wow.
that was back
Okay.
and forth. You absolutely need to watch it. Everyone who's watching me right now talk about it. If you didn't see it, go back and watch Collision. Kyle Fletcher is one of the greats right now, and Ace Austin is terribly unheralded and hopefully gets a big opportunity with this bigger platform he has in AEW. Last night was a great start for that because he showed out exactly what he could do. These two put on an absolute clinic.
Awesome. Okay. All right. So my match of the week a little bit more mundane, I guess. I mean, it's a WWE match, but this guy ever since he came back, and Sammy gave him his big shot to come back. Yeah, I cannot get enough of this guy. I don't think I've actually mentioned him as far as like in a match of the week since he went up against Gunther way, way back in the day. But Ilya Dragunov and Johnny
Uh,
Gargano, this this
uh,
this yeah, I mean, Mr. Wrestling and Johnny Gargano, Mr. Wrestling right there. Even with the like silliness of Candice LeRae at ringside, it's okay. It's okay because Dragonoff and Gargano can just work it, right? And I really think after watching Dragonoff for a couple of weeks now, I really think the dude not only likes to work stiff, I think he likes to be stiff. He wants those potatoes, and I'm not sure if he's giving receipts back. He's just working that tight and that stiff, and he seems to enjoy it. And, I think he may end up accidentally hurting somebody someday or hurting himself really bad because he is in that finisher. My goodness, that
Oh,
looks
the yeah,
like like some drunk AMA or not an AMA, an MMA kind of thing where you're just going to go down on the opponent and just kind of lay on top. I've never seen a finisher like that. It's just mind blowing. But yeah, Gargano, Dragunov, I got to give it to
yeah.
him this week.
There's certainly nothing you said mundane. There's certainly nothing mundane about those two when they match up. Dragunov, I think, is another one of those guys that you're going to have to keep an eye on. If he stays healthy, I think
If
his
he stays
profile
healthy,
is
yes.
going to go up. Yeah, he's been underrated for a while. And Johnny's criminally underrated, but is
Yes.
Mr. Wrestling for a reason. That was an excellent match. So if you watch two matches this week, go watch the two that Doug and I
There
just
you
talked
go.
about. And if we missed something, let us know what it is that we should go see because we're about out of here, Doug.
Yep, we are out. So until next time, folks. Wait, should we promote next week's show? Do we have a show next week, Kevin? We do,
We have
right?
a show next week. We are actually getting down to the last shows of the year before we take our holiday hiatus. So you'll want to come back next week. We got Full Gear preview coming up, and then we got Survivor Series at the end of the month. So we'll preview and review
Yeah,
that, and then
okay.
we have a special Christmas episode, and we're done for the year.
Whoa. And we're
And
done
that's
for
when we
you.
come back that's when we come back with our award show, which is always fun, picking the best
Always.
of from the entire year. So a lot of good things happening. Make sure you're back with us next week. Until then.
Go watch some wrestling. Thanks, everybody.